Yeah.
Uh, feel free as we get going, ask any questions along the way. The main goal for these kinds of sessions, we got a few more people joining roundtable style. So feel free, you can drop in the chat if you want to, or you can just unpause and be like, hey, can you explain this a little bit more? No promises I have all the answers, but because this feature is so new, I feel like, man, we gotta just talk about it from a Lindy perspective. What's up, Armin? Welcome, welcome. So I'm Michael, co-founder of Worldwide Studios. From an education perspective, we help people build with the latest tools like Lindy. We also just hosted a robotic hackathon this weekend in lab automation. So we also do a little bit more than just the no code side of things. The goal
Mhm.
for this session is to go over how to create evals within Lindy. So in classical machine learning, you could do a whole PhD on just evaluations of does this model do what you want it to do in terms of accuracy, in terms of expected behavior. There's a whole area of math in terms of evals. That's a rabbit hole. Today, what we're looking at, and then actually to Alex's point, if you don't have eval set up, it ends up being a human in the loop. So instead of like using an LM, this would be like a human saying every time we have an email agent sent an email, let's make sure a human team member is watching what's happening. That's not really that scalable. And especially when you start having more complex systems, there might be specific things that you want to have on Rails. And so we're looking today at what does it look like to have an LLM. So to have, we're using Lindy, have a large language model, get an email, send an email out. That could happen as many times as needed. And based off of that, every time an email is sent, have another Lindy watch that email sent to decide if it was good or not. And in terms of that evaluation, really whatever you want to evaluate, just like you would have human in the loop checking the work, you could create an evaluation function for. So you could do it based off of accuracy. Is this actually using our knowledge base and saying real things, or is it hallucinating? So one simple evaluation is just, is this accurate? Which is important when you start doing emails. Another one is like, is there a resolution? Did they actually complete the task that they're helping a client or a customer answer? Because the goal is not to just send emails back and forth. We had one person we coached, their email Lindy talked to another email Lindy, and it was like 150 emails. It looks like a meme. So in terms of completing the task, there are some failure paths that you don't want to go down. There's also usually resolution when you're managing an inbox. So did you get to a resolution? You also could do things like tone and different things, which I'll show. So, in terms of evaluating, the same thing a human would be evaluating the loop, you can set that up as an eval Lindy and decide, does this make sense? And then from there, the reason that this is important is you now have the aggregated data that you could analyze day over day, week over week to really understand where the system is performing and working and where the system isn't working. So the whole reason to have evaluations is to get better observability on the system so you can redesign it for different use cases and you just have an understanding of what's going on and it's not just black boxy. So that's why evals are important. And when seeing that Lindy can observe other Lindys, it's like, let's see what that looks like. So first I'll just show you, we got two Lindys set up and these are very, very simple Lindys where first we're just have an email agent. So as an email is received, we have an email agent where most of the work is done in a prompt. You're a customer support bot, write in all lowercase. That's our branding guide. Figure out what you need to do to finish the task. You've got a few tools like Perplexity and Knowledge Base. And if someone needs to hop on a call, bring in a team member through a calendar invite. And then a few rules, reply, write super short. We don't need 2-3 page long memos in email. Complete your task independently. Don't ask for support if you don't need it. Ask clarifying questions if you're missing information. And per email, just send one link. Don't try to spam people with more than that. So, in terms of this, we've got an email customer support agent. The agent node in Lindy is a wild one because it is free form. So that's where this eval will come into play because we don't have condition paths set up. We don't have specific actions. We're letting the agent really do the full work on the inbox. And so as this agent is turned on and we'll get emails, the second Lindy that we've got here, in terms of the main features here, in Lindy, when we go into the nodes, if you go into the category that says by Lindy, under the by Lindy nodes, there's Lindy utilities. And this is where you're actually, so this is the trigger node specifically. A trigger is a way to start and wake up a Lindy. This one, we've got the ability to say anytime an agent changes their task, let's trigger this Lindy. So for this one, every time the email Lindy sends an email, let's wake this Lindy up. So we're using this specific trigger to say when an email is sent from the last Lindy. Let's look at it here. And I'm just going to refresh the page. to get to the parameter window. Once it's woken up, then we're using a second Lindy utility, which is observing.
I have a question.
Yep, go
Does
for it.
you're saying agent what? So ours are broken down into individual nodes like send reply, send reply. Is that all captured in this, or does it have to be in that AI agent type of?
Nope, it could be the same thing. And so I'll show you that Lindy and Zoom sometimes freeze. So I'm just zooming out here, see if we can get the parameter window back. And so on your side, when you have a specific like send email, I'm just using the word agent as I know we have an agent node here, but if you have a Lindy monitoring inbox, you're doing something pretty much agentically and independently where the AI is doing what it's supposed to on the inbox. And so for the eval for you all, when you have a task change here, so in the parameter window here, just like when you have specific emails that you don't want to go down a Lindy workflow, you can actually filter by properties. So if you have a bunch of different kinds of tasks in your Lindy and you only want to filter properties that have the Gmail node, so only when your Lindy is sending emails, it'll filter for that. Or if you have specific names here, like this is start Lindy, and you've got a specific naming schema where you can figure out what's happening step by step. You can also filter out here. So maybe you have one that only watches like on start and then everything else it ignores. So for you all, you can actually start filtering in specific parts of the subtask. It doesn't have to be the whole thing. You also can also filter by state of resolve status. So you can start by when something is started. You can filter by I have success. So as something is sent, if something is canceled or failed, you could also catch the errors because sometimes Lindy as a platform fails. So those are the two main ways to be able to filter, at least for this trigger, for listening to a Lindy. Then the second main part of this eval is getting tasks done. And so for getting tasks done, getting task details, what this is doing is in the specific Lindy, so in the customer support Lindy that I just showed you on the other tab, for this Lindy, grab the task details when it's success. And same thing, you could filter by task properties. So if you don't need all of the tasks that are happening, you can filter by just when email is sent or just when second email is sent, etc. So for this, I'm just pulling all of the tasks so we can see it in action. And then the last thing I'm doing is I'm exporting this eval to a Google spreadsheet because then we can run more analysis once the evals are run. And the evals right now, this is an LLM looking and observing another LLM. So usually for evals, I like to use a smarter model. So 2.5 Pro, got a bit of reasoning in it. And I've left these all on auto just to let Lindy figure out what the eval is. But for these, you can also prompt them or write manual prompts that help get more specific based off of what you're specifically looking to evaluate. So the whole goal for these two Lindys, we've got one Lindy that's getting an email, one Lindy that's watching the email sent. And so whole goal, I'm going to send an email to the Lindy agent, and the eval Lindy should populate this Google sheet where it's pulling out the task name. It's saying if it's accurate or not. It's saying if it got resolved in 4 emails. Did the customer get more mad? So this customer support, we're just like looking at escalations. Did it follow our brand guide? And also, when you start evaluating, you can also have suggestions for the future. So if this thing is monitoring the kinds of emails coming through, this is totally like open-ended, just like let us know what kind of problem this is. Maybe there's actually a root cause where it's not actually an email problem. There's a systems problem. So this is kind of just throwing in for fun to show like the full breadth of what an eval Lindy can do. So an email, let's do this. I got a few questions. Hi team, I'm mad. I want a refund. This was bad. Please help. So we're just sending an email out now. So that email is getting sent to this email support Lindy. For those new to Lindy, you've got the canvas where you can design Lindys. Happy to answer questions afterwards. And then you have the task window. The task window is as things come in, you can watch them get processed by the Lindy. So this is one I tested just right before this to make sure that this was working. From an agent perspective, you can see how it's thinking. You can see send reply. And the reason it's important to kind of look at the task window, this is the data and information that will be sent to the evaluation Lindy. So just like you can click in here to see like what it's doing, in terms of who it's replying to, what the body of the text is. Same thing we're going to see in the eval lindy. So I'm just
The
going to refresh.
evaluation Lindy doesn't have, you don't have to build down any knowledge base over there. You don't have to put anything in the memories. It's using all of that from the main Lindy.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, the evaluation Lindy, you're not having, because I mean, we're saying, is this accurate? Is this whatever? So it has to have some source of truth, I guess. Is it pulling from the other Lindy? You don't have to build that out in this new Lindy. Is that right?
Yeah, good question. So this is all auto prompted. So if you wanted to, um,
Right.
you could put for accuracy, if you have like a 1 page or 2 page document, that's totally fine in the context window. You could actually just paste it in here saying, here are the 10 things or 20 things or 2 pages that we want to make sure is right. So I've seen people actually just add that to the prompt if it's a light eval. And if it's not, what you can do here on this Lindy, you can add in a knowledge base. As of right now, I don't know a way to share knowledge bases. If someone else on the call knows, feel free to do that. But what you can do is you can add in another knowledge base for the eval Lindy, so it has all the information it needs to then evaluate that.
So like our current Lindy, the send reply will have, if this, do this, if that, do that. And it's got all this information in there. So it's not going to pull from that. We would need to then bring it over
You'd
here
bring
and
that back to the
okay.
eval Lindy, exactly. And what you could say is like, hey, here are some use cases where like this is going to fail. Let us know if this fails. So it's the same kind of logic, and you're adding redundancy to your system. So if it hallucinates or misses it, this should catch that. So you would have to copy and paste that here. Which maybe that shifts in Lindy's roadmap, but as of right now, each Lindy is independent, and you just have to copy different things over. If it's prompts, if it's information, if it's knowledge base, so some rule logic, and so you can bring that into the prompt here. So let's see here. Let's make sure that this actually caught the email. Cool. So it got the information from the email sent Lindy. And that was the tasks. So it can actually click right into the task link to make sure it's the right one. It's grabbing the task details. So you can see here, we've got some metadata, the ID, the time created, the owner, the task ID. Let's see what these are. These are the actions. So because it's an agent, Lindy, it's figuring out like what to do. And then probably by the third one, let's see if we get to the email itself. Okay, so this is the message received. So this is the email that it's getting. So it's pulling in all of this information, which you can sort through and better understand depending on what you're evaluating. For me, just sent it to an AI, and let's see. So we got accuracy, resolved. Did the customer get more mad? All lowercase. Yes, yes, yes. Offer path to resolution. Let's see if this is here. Understand you're frustrated. Could you let me know what specific service or product you like refunded once I have the info? I want a refund on purchase. And so this one's asking for more information. And then, so to Alex's question, in terms of some of the things, this was set up as a demo. So in terms of accuracy, would actually figure out what does accuracy mean in this case. So I would actually add to the prompt what that looks like. And then the one thing too is in terms of getting it resolved in less than 4 emails, you could set up some logic that says if the task is continued and you're getting more emails from one person, then you could see at what that looks like. Because right now this is just looking at like single per task. And this actually doesn't have it right because that last email wasn't resolved. So what I would do in Lindy here, if I go back to the eval Lindy, in terms of this particular part of, if we go into resolved, so in auto prompting, this isn't actually getting like the right information. So I'd actually change this to say, if resolved equals no more action needed. If there's more information asked, then it's not resolved. And if the back and forth is more than 4 emails, then this fails, this eval. So the auto didn't seem to work there because it thought that that last email was resolved, even though it asked for more information. So in terms of building out information and logic, this is usually how I iterate through Lindy's, is just seeing if I can solve it in the prompt. And if I can't solve it in the prompt, then we can do it structurally through Lindy itself. Well, let's save that. Let's see.
I know the prompts are editable. Are those rows editable as well? Because I mean, solved in four emails that may not be relevant, or are they more mad? I assume
Yeah,
that's
so
all.
these I just added these in to show like different kinds of evals you could run, like accuracy, like just time to complete a task. Each one of these is just
Here,
you could.
okay.
This is just a Google sheet I made from scratch. We could delete these, we could skip these, we could edit these. So this is just giving you an example of different attributes you could run evaluations on, and based on what you're trying to run that eval for, you have to decide if a prompt is good enough, if you need a knowledge base, maybe you need a few examples. So being able to find examples where the Lindy failed before, and that's what you're catching is you have human in the loop. You could actually add that to the prompt as a few shot example. So depending on what you want to evaluate, you could also just have one evaluation. Sometimes it's just like did this follow the knowledge base? That might be enough based off of your specific workflow, your intended output. So you can really design the eval for what makes sense for this use case and also what you're trying to measure for the Lindy itself. So that's the demo. I think the main thing here is just these kinds of nodes in Lindy just become really helpful because again, if you're not evaluating, so under Lindy utilities, if you're not evaluating the task specifically, then there's no insight in terms of how Lindy is working, especially if you're doing something like emails and it's processing hundreds of emails a day. It becomes very tedious for a human in the loop to do that. So this becomes a layer. It might not replace a human entirely, but it makes the human's job easier because they become more of like an orchestrator across different Lindys or across the evals versus having to read through every single email reply and see what's up. And so this is a way to help filter and get more information. And I think the interesting thing here from an eval perspective, there's an evaluation that's just directly orthogonal that says, based off the email sent, did we do the job? There's also evals you can run that are more hierarchical. So you could call this like the eval agent. What you could do is at the end of each week, pull all of the tasks from that specific Lindy and say like, hey, based off this inbox, if it's a customer support inbox, what are the top 3 things that people are complaining about, or what's the majority of this inbox, and how might you solve these problems? So again, if you're in a customer support inbox, usually that's a symptom, not a root cause. So you could actually run an evaluation that's gathering all of the data and trying to make sense of all of the back and forth. So you could have a report up. So you could have a Lindy that goes up, and that would help make actionable. Like, hey, one of the biggest problems we have is our invoicing system doesn't work. Please update like step number 2 because 30% of the invoice problems are happening on step number 2. So you can actually identify problems and send them up. You also can send them down to other Lindys too. Just like a customer support team might pass off something to a sales team member for evaluating what's happening in information. It's not just about looking at the task. Could also hand off information that says, based off this customer, you could update things in a CRM. You could have different follow-ups. You could go back and say, hey, let's make sure to offer this person a discount in the future because they had a really bad experience or whatever it may be. So when you start thinking about evaluation, I think the most important thing is actually just figuring out the eval. So you're evaluating the tasks horizontally. But if you can get task data and there's other questions you have, you can send it up just like a manager or PM would be doing. You can also hand it off to another Lindy entirely. So you don't have these data silos where the Lindys aren't talking to each other. And so that's it for the demo. Curious if anyone has any additional questions. Appreciate the questions along the way, Alex. And if you've got more questions, feel free to fire them off.
Eric, you have anything? I don't want to just keep.
I say, Eric, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, just in case. I don't want to.
Yeah, totally okay. Eric, feel free to jump in. If you've got questions, you can drop in the chat or you can unmute. Dylan, same thing. If you've got any questions, feel free to ask.
Oh, I thought Dylan was with you.
He is, but every time we're on a session, these are the first time we run these sessions. So every week we push new things. And so questions just come up.
Yeah.
I'd be curious about the eval up the end of the week summary type of thing. Are you able to show anything on that?
I don't have one live. When one of the people we've been working with, they've been before the meta lindy task was available, they've been dumping it to Airtable and they've been reading the whole Airtable. And that's actually just as simple where it's taken all the information from the week and then they have three questions that they ask in a prompt. And those three questions then get filled in. So you can think of it almost like a postmortem, like what went well and where are numbers increasing, what didn't go well, where is this week, where's like the biggest failure points, and then any ideas to make sure that these kinds of emails don't make their way into the future. Can't show that because that's an internal client project. But in terms of that workflow, because context windows have gotten so big for large language models, you can pull a full week's worth of email. Their inbox is about 100 to 150 a day, and they can fit all of that into a context window. So they're just using one prompt to get a summary, which they can then double click and filter the data if they want to more. But previously, they just had no observability at kind of that macro level for what was happening.
Interesting. And what is your company? Are you like you're not with Lindy, you're
Not with
building.
Lindy, we're an education nonprofit where we help people build. So we'll run free sessions like this, which we end up posting on YouTube. We run personal one-on-one sprints. So for people who are building with new tools like Lindy or 11 Labs and people get stuck, we help them one-on-one. We also do 30-day programs and challenges. We just finished a program with Google DeepMind in Nairobi, Kenya, helping doctors learn how to code with Cursor and Lovable. We had about 5 teams spin out projects to build. So we treat building like a sport and everything like that. This is like the free pass at the gym. Like, let's just get a taste. Let's have a conversation. We wish there was more honest conversation around building with these tools. So this is that. And we do everything from 2-week sprints, one-on-one to larger cohort programs.
But so, I mean, you said you're nonprofit. I assume you're still the user's paying for those things, right?
Yeah, it's a member based model. So just like you'd pay for a gym, you'd pay to access for that. And for the larger programs, we actually those end up being fully sponsored by partners, so we can offer those for free.
If you wouldn't mind, this is redundant, but I'm gonna pull up Lindy. Can you just go through which? Let me just make sure I got it. Or is this recording going to be available? I want to make sure I have the exact action.
Yeah, this recording's gonna be available, so we'll send it
Okay,
over afterwards. And if you wanna do like a Lindy review, we can end the recording here. If no one has any further questions, if you want to do a little deep dive on your side,
I'd be happy to.
cool. Let's